Well, it's great to be here with you all. Thanks for taking the time to come here. I know you have a lot of exciting things to do, students. I think I have a daughter that's in high school, and I tried to convince her that she should come up with me tonight because I keep telling her, like, Utah State is one of the most amazing places to go to school. See? I'll tell you what, at the University of Utah, I wouldn't have even got that response if I said that, right? But there really is a special spirit about Logan and about Utah State, and I've just been so impressed. I've only been up to Logan like 3 times in my life, but every time I've come, I'm like, this is like a really cool place to live, a cool place to be a student for sure. So I'm excited to tell you a little bit about Cotopaxi and about who we are. And to start, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and kind of how I grew up and why that ended up impacting the way I decided to build this business. When I was 4 years old, my family left the United States and we moved to the developing world. We moved to Latin America. And this is my dad on the left. He's an adventurer. And so we grew up, like it was mentioned, we made our own raft and we floated the Amazon River fishing for piranha. We'd go survive on little uninhabited islands in the ocean, and we'd spear fish with spears we'd made ourselves and eat coconuts. Like, I thought this was normal behavior, but I had a really fun childhood where I developed a deep love for the outdoors. But more importantly, I developed a deep sense of empathy for others. One of my earliest memories as a small child was seeing children that were my age, 2, 3, 4 years old, that were standing on the sides of the street completely naked. And at that young age, I was trying to reconcile why my life was so different from theirs. And I didn't grow up in a wealthy home, but I had opportunities that these kids would never have. And it had nothing to do with how smart I was or how hardworking I was, or how deserving I was, or how ambitious I was. It only had to do with where I was born. I could have very easily been born in their place, and I would not be where I'm at today. And so, from the time I was a child, I knew that was my life's mission. It was something I've thought about every day since I was a child, was to try to figure out a way that I could touch the lives of other people, that I could be of use to others, and try to help those that live in extreme poverty. So I ended up coming back to the United States, went to university here, and when I was in college, I decided that I wanted to go back to Latin America, and I wanted to find a way to help. So I found a nonprofit internship. Who's done or is going to do the SEED program? Look at that. That's awesome. That's an amazing program. It wasn't what I did, but it was very similar to that, honestly. I went and I taught courses, and even though I didn't really know much myself, but it was a really great learning experience. And I went to Peru and had just a life-changing experience. I went to a little city called Cusco, which is near Machu Picchu. I know what you're all thinking. Cusco is a llama in Emperor's New Groove. But there's a city called Cusco. It's this magical place. When I got there, it took my breath away. I just remember seeing these ruins everywhere, these beautiful Incan ruins. And instead of going and eating my first meal in a restaurant, I thought, I'm gonna go get some food, and I'm gonna go sit on a park bench in the middle of this plaza, in the center plaza of the city, the Plaza de Armas. And I'm gonna sit in there, and I'm gonna soak up the magic of the city while I eat my lunch. And so I went and sat on this bench, I started eating, and all these little kids run up to me, and they're trying to sell me things. They're trying to sell me finger puppets, they're trying to sell me postcards, candy, and having grown up in Latin America, I immediately connected with these kids and started joking around with them. After a while, they all ran off, except for one little boy, a little 9-year-old boy named Edgar. And he sat on his shoe shiny kit, and he kept insisting that he wanted to shine my shoes. And it took me a few minutes to actually convince him it's not possible to shine tennis shoes. And so he wasn't going to get any work from me. But after a while, I realized he was still sitting there watching me eat. I realized maybe he was sitting there because he was hungry. And so I offered him the rest of my food. And I had never seen somebody eat like that. He just absolutely devoured this food. And so that night when I got dinner, I decided I was going to save some of my dinner and I was going to look for this little boy. He was always easy to spot. He had a hole in the butt of his pants with no underwear on, and so you could always spot him from a distance. And I went into the main plaza and found him straight away, and he was so shocked that I'd come back to find him with this food. And he took it and he ran back and started sharing it with all of his little friends. And this became a daily ritual for me. It was the highlight of my day every single day, finding Edgar. My last night in Cusco, as I was walking back to my place, I was walking down the sidewalk. It was cold. It was close to midnight. You could see your breath in the air. And as I was walking down the sidewalk, I saw two little boys cuddled against each other with their sweaters pulled over their knees, trying to stay warm. And as I got closer, I recognized that one of these little boys was Edgar. And I woke him up, and I could tell he'd been crying. He had these tear stains on his dark cheeks. And I asked him why he was sleeping on the street. And he told me that someone had stolen his shoe shiny kit. And he was too afraid to go home because his dad was an alcoholic and his mom depended on him to help feed his family. This is a 9-year-old. And so I gave him the little bit of cash that I had. I didn't have much. And that night I could hardly sleep. I was so worried about my little friend. And the next day I got on a bus to leave Cusco for the last time. And as I went around the main plaza in this bus, as it let some people on and off, I looked out the window and I saw Edgar. And he saw me. And we had just enough time where he ran next to this bus. I slid open the window and he ran next to me waving goodbye. And he'd bought this big bag of candy that he was now selling in the street. And so he was an entrepreneur, which I just love now. But it was on that bus as we drove away that I made a commitment to myself that I was going to find a way to use my life to help kids like Edgar. So I got back to university, and I was carrying around every single day this article. And I had a clear-faced binder in school, and in this clear-faced binder I had this article that I'd read when I first started school. It was an article about a man named Steve Gibson, and he'd been a successful entrepreneur, had sold his business, had made millions of dollars, but that's not what interested me. I didn't really care about that. What I loved is that he had then moved to the Philippines, and he and his wife had started a program teaching entrepreneurship to people in the Philippines to help them lift themselves out of poverty. And I just loved that this man had identified talents that he had, and that he was using those talents to go lift the lives of others. And so I cut out this article. I carried it around school every day during my time in undergrad. In fact, I still have the article in my office at home. And as I was around school, I'd see this article every day. And as I finished my time in undergrad, I went to a social impact conference on a weekend, on a Saturday. And as I was going in between some different sessions, I'm walking down the hallway, and I see Steve Gibson, the guy from this article, my idol. He's getting into an elevator. So I run down the hallway, and I stick my arm in the elevator door as it's closing, and it pops back open. I jump inside, and he's trapped. He has to talk to me. And so I tell him that I know who he is. I'm sure he's probably creeped out a little bit at this point, but he was so humble. And this guy is a multimillionaire. He's changed thousands of people's lives. I'm a nobody. But he was acting so flattered that I recognized him. And he asked me if I'd be interested in meeting him in a couple weeks in his office. So I took him up on the offer. And for 2 weeks, I prepared a pitch where I was going to convince him to let me go work for him. And I practiced this pitch in the mirror 1,000 times. I had it down. And I showed up in his office, and I gave him the whole spiel. And the whole time he's smiling, and he's nodding. And I'm thinking, nailing it. Totally going to get to work for my idol. This is going to be amazing. And at the end he goes, Davis, I love how passionate you are about finding a way to help people. But you don't want to work for me. What you should do is you should go become an entrepreneur. I see that you would be a great entrepreneur. You should do that. And then 10 or 20 years down the line, you'll find your own way of making an impact. And it was great advice. I know Steve Gibson well now. We still get together a couple times a year. We go grab a meal together. He's probably close to 80 now, or getting close to that. And what I found is that he actually tells everyone they would be a great entrepreneur. And so turns out I wasn't special. But, honestly, it gave me confidence. It gave me confidence to go out and try something on my own. And so I ended up starting my first business right out of school. And it was a pretty random business. It was a business called pooltables.com. It's exactly what you think it is. And I basically had this idea that we could go manufacture our own brand of pool tables. And so I went online that night and I Googled pool table factory China. And that's how I found our first factories. I'd studied international studies in undergrad, and I knew a bit about China. I'd never been to Asia before, but I bought a ticket to China, flew out and visited some factories, and we started selling, my cousin and I started selling these pool tables online, and then eventually started opening up physical retail stores around the United States. And it ended up becoming the largest retailer of pool tables in the US. It's a pretty small industry, so it wasn't actually that impressive, but it was a really fun first business for two young entrepreneurs. And we decided we didn't want to be the pool table guys forever, and we'd always dreamed of going back and doing our MBAs. I'd always wanted to go to the Wharton School. They have a really unique program called the Lauder Institute, which is a dual degree. You do an MBA and an MA in International Studies. And there's about 70 people admitted to the program each year. People that are admitted in the program speak foreign language at an advanced level. Everyone in the program has lived all over the world. So it was a program that really spoke to me. My cousin had always wanted to go to Harvard Business School. And so we applied to school. We were lucky enough that we both got into our dream schools, and we sold the business. We left the business to go back to school. And while we were in school, we decided to do something together again. So we ended up coming up with 60 business ideas during our first year of school. And then we went out to Silicon Valley during the summer between our first and second year of business school. And we took those 60 ideas and we slowly filtered them down to 4. And then we spent the bulk of that summer on those 4 ideas. We were at Stanford campus and we were meeting with professors and other students and meeting with VCs, and we slowly took these 4 ideas and vetted them and tested them and tried to figure out which idea would have the highest likelihood of success. And we ended up starting a business in Brazil. So we moved back to Latin America where I'd grown up. We went from 4 employees to 300 employees in 18 months. It was just a crazy, crazy experience. And in a lot of ways, it was a dream come true. I was back in Latin America. My 2 daughters were speaking Portuguese and going to school there, and we were having these amazing adventures. I was building this really fun business. At the same time, I knew that I wanted to leave. And no one really understood why. But every single day, especially being in Brazil, I would think of Edgar. I would think of this little boy and this experience that I'd had. I've thought of Edgar every single day since 2001 when I first met him. And so I decided that I was going to leave, and I was going to go start something that could sustainably alleviate poverty. I wanted to do something that could make a difference. And I had the idea of building a brand that could inspire people to go do good with me. I figured that I could do much more good if I could inspire people to go work alongside me to go make the world a better place. And I also wanted to build a business because I knew that through business I could sustainably do good. I love nonprofits, and I love that we support amazing nonprofits. But one thing I saw, one challenge, is that nonprofits constantly have to beg other people for money to go be sustainable. And I knew that if I built a business that could create its own profits to go do good, that it would sustainably be able to go do good. And as I scaled and grew the business, it would be able to have a bigger and bigger impact. So I moved back to the US and started a brand called Cotopaxi. Cotopaxi is the name of a volcano in Ecuador, one of the places I grew up as a kid and as a teenager. The school I went to was called Academia Cotopaxi, named after this volcano. And I used to go with my dad backpacking and camping all around Cotopaxi, this one of the largest active volcanoes in the world. And so, but I wanted to build a brand that wasn't just about making gear and just about selling stuff to people. I wanted people to be able to go live the brand and what our brand stood for. This idea of making the world a better place, of exploring the world and seeing and connecting with cultures that are different than ours. And so we ended up coming up with the idea of creating an event called the Questival. Has anyone done the Questival before? A few of you. We have a Questival in the spring and in the fall in Utah every year, and then we do it around the country as well. But the whole idea was that we were going to create an event, an experience so that people could go live these brand values. So the first thing that we did, this is before we'd sold anything. Our website wasn't live. No one knew who Cotopaxi even was. We went on to the KSL Classifieds and we bought 2 llamas. And we started showing up on college campuses, including here in Logan, with these 2 llamas. We just show up in the middle of campus. We didn't ask for permission. I remember going down to BYU with these llamas. And BYU is a pretty strict place, right? I think we all know that. So I show up on campus with these llamas, and I'm thinking, it's got to be a matter of minutes before they come and arrest the llamas. Like, there's no way we last long. So we get into this heart of campus, Brigham Square, right in the heart of campus with these llamas. Within minutes, there are hundreds of people gathered around the llamas, asking why the llamas are on campus, and we're like handing out flyers like crazy about the Questival, this 24-hour adventure race. You form a team with your friends, you get hundreds of challenges, and then the winning teams get to go get gear and go on trips and other things. So all of a sudden the student newspaper came out and did a story on the llamas being on campus and told the story of the Cotopaxi brand. And about 4 hours in, I'm not sure how it took so long, but the campus police roll up in this golf cart. And I'm just like, this is it. One of the police officers walks out of this golf cart, comes up to me, he's like, "Sir, can I take a selfie with your llama?" And I was like, what? And that's when I realized, like, you can break any law as long as you have a llama with you. And so, we ended up having this amazing experience. And I'm going to play a quick video that tells the story of the Questival. And a bunch of this footage is actually from the very first Questival, and then some of it's intermixed with some of the, like, I think the second or third Questival that we did as well.
Okay, guys, it's here.
Okay, what are we gonna do tomorrow?
Let's go stop climbing first. We should go to the canyon first.
So we ended up having a few thousand people show up at this very first Questival, and we had 30,000 social media posts the day of our launch. This is people wearing our backpacks, because everyone that did the race gets one of our backpacks, living the brand, giving service in the community. And it was a great way for us to go kick off this brand. We had these people that were brand evangelists that had lived the brand for those 24 hours. And so if you guys are looking for something to do with your friends in the spring, it's usually like in April, definitely, and then one in October called October Quest. But definitely go check that out. I mean, it's something that will be really a life-changing experience. It's one of the things that you'll look back on years later and be like, I can't believe we did all that stuff, and you'll have just dear memories with those friends that you do it with. But that was a really interesting way for us to go build this brand, right? It wasn't just about product, it was about experiences. Understanding that your generation cares a lot more about experiences than it does necessarily about things, right? So this was something that's become an important part of our brand. The second thing is we wanted to think differently about making product. It wasn't just about making the most technical outdoor gear. There are plenty of brands that do that already. Arc'teryx, Black Diamond, a bunch of others that can frankly make you really intimidated too, right? If you've never been climbing and you go to learn how to climb, it's like sometimes it's not super welcoming. And so, for us, we really wanted to build an inclusive brand that was welcoming to anyone and whatever type of adventure they wanted to have. For some people, it might be climbing. It might be skinning up a mountain and skiing down it. For other people, it might not be those things. It might be
There's one collection that really encompasses Cotopaxi.
Or going camping with their friends, or going on a trip and going exploring the world in some unique way. Maybe on a seed internship in the Philippines or in Peru or one of these really cool places. Like that's an adventure. That's what our brand stands for. And so we've tried to build these values into the product, into the product stories. And so one of the ways we did this was actually through a line of products that we call the Del Dia. So I'm going to play a quick video here that tells that story.
And its Gear for Good philosophy, it's the Del Dia collection. It all started with us not wanting to create more waste. It developed into also empowering the employees at the factory to be more creative themselves. From the ground up, each Del Dia product is one of a kind and handcrafted by different individuals throughout the production process. It starts with somebody going into the warehouse and handpicking the fabrics. Then it goes to the pattern makers and the screen printers, and then to the sewers who select the materials they want to use. And it's all of these creative steps that come together to create a one-of-a-kind Del Dia product.
Asan yung bag ko maganda?
So, anong kulay ang pinakagusto mo dyan sa bag?
Gusto ko yung red, kasi sign ng love yun. Yung mga Pilipino kasi mapagmahal masyado yan eh.
Gusto ko mga dark color eh. Parang masayang tingnan ba? Nakakaalis ng stress, nakakaalis ng pagod. Pag nakita mo talaga yung bag, pag yung mga dark color na ganun, napapatawa ka na. Talaga napapa-smile ka na.
I've been on the production floor and I've seen this process come together. It's something our factory in the Philippines is really proud of. Our goal with the Del Dia collection is to connect you with the creators of these products, to get you outside, to help you do good, and to inspire others to do the same.
So that's one of my favorite stories. This factory in the Philippines is really amazing. Has anyone been to the Philippines before? It is one of the most special places on earth. I mean, just the happiest, kindest people around. And I love this factory. The average sewer's been there 11 and a half years. They get paid well and fairly. It's a safe place to work. They rock to 80s music all day long, my favorite. And it's just a really special place. But we saw two big problems. The first was there was a ton of waste that was created. This is the same factory that Patagonia and Arc'teryx, Black Diamond, they all use the same factory. There is a massive amount of waste. And so we wanted to find a way to use that material. The second problem we saw was that the average sewer that had been there 11 and a half years never got to choose or design anything on their own. They were just told what to sew by people like us, and then they would have to do that all day long. And we felt like they're amazing craftsmen, they're artisans. Why don't we allow them to go design the product and to create it? And so that was the one role we gave them, was to make no bag alike. They could use these remnants to go build these bags, but every single one of them is unique. And so if you go use one of these products, as a customer, it's pretty awesome because you have a bag that's unique to you that no one else on the planet has, and that was designed by one of these amazing artisans. This is another quick video. This is a special one for me. I lived in Bolivia, an amazing country. I lived in a little city that people make about $200 a year in per capita income, incredibly poor. And I'd always wanted to go back and find a way to help this community. And so we ended up developing a supply chain, and I'm gonna play this quick video, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it.
Es de bastante importancia la llama. Con eso compramos mercaderías, alimentación y educación para los hijos. O sea, aquí vivimos desde los abuelos que han vivido hace más de 500 años, debe ser, los abuelos que han vivido, ¿no? Y siempre no nos vamos a olvidar nuestro campo, donde los abuelos, papás han vivido. Siempre van a estar generación y generación. Yo sé que a un tiempo mis hijos también estarán aquí.
You know, growing up in South America, I saw llama wool and llama fiber being used constantly, and it was the fiber they used for thousands of years. So it's been interesting to see how underdeveloped this industry is, despite having been around for so long. And we're just barely kind of tapping the surface about how we can have the greatest impact on the livelihoods and lives of these individuals living in the Andes.
Well, I love the Kusa jacket because it is a story that keeps on giving. And so it has this traditional exterior, but technical fabrics, amazing colors. And instead of just putting a polyester or down insulation in it, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper to see what other natural fibers are out there. I knew it worked technically, but now to see how it can work with building and preserving communities completely changed me as a designer and how I want to design future products.
I think one of the most powerful parts of the Cotopaxi brand is this connection of product to people. And one thing that we're hoping to accomplish is to allow people, as they're wearing one of our products, to actually feel a connection with an individual that lives in Bolivia. So we make sweaters, we have these blankets that we also insulate, and some jackets that we insulate with llama wool. The socks that I'm wearing are actually made of Bolivian llama wool from these little communities. And so we've been able to go back and improve livelihoods of these amazing people that I really love. And so, again, finding ways to incorporate our values into the product itself. That way when you are a customer, when a customer is wearing one of our bags, and then one of those really funky, colorful bags, people will stop them and say, wait, where did you get that? That's like really crazy. And it empowers people to go tell that story. Whereas they're wearing one of our llama products to be able to tell that story. One of my favorite parts of the brand as well is the work that we do to do good. So we have dedicated, so far all of our profits have been used to support poverty alleviation to date. And this is one of the nonprofits that we've supported over the years, a nonprofit in India called Educate Girls. And in a lot of parts of the world, in India and parts of Africa and other places, the education of girls is not valued the same as it is for boys. And we're on a mission to change that. And so this nonprofit goes door to door in some of these communities in India and identifies families where girls are not in school and helps educate the parents around the importance of making sure their girls are educated. Because when you educate a girl, you end up educating a mother. And when you educate mothers, you end up educating an entire community. And so this is an amazing place that we're proud to support. One of my other favorite stories is if you've ever ordered a Cotopaxi product on our website, you'll get a handwritten thank you card that's included in your package. And when we first started the business, I actually wrote thank you cards myself. I'd write these handwritten thank you cards. That only lasted a few weeks before I realized I can't do this any longer. Like, it was just not scalable. But one of our early employees, who was actually a Utah State alum, she immediately was like, I've got a great idea. Davis, I know how important it is for you to write these handwritten thank you cards. You can't do it anymore. She knew that I was really passionate about refugees, and she said, what if we allowed some refugees to have this work and we paid them for it? And I loved the idea. And so we created this program with the International Rescue Committee, the IRC, where we created a job club. And our team volunteers and teaches these refugees how to create a resume, how to do a job interview, how to follow up after a job interview. We've helped them set up bank accounts so they can get their first direct deposit. These refugees were able to have their first job. And you can see they write the thank you card in their native language. Many of them are still learning English. It's, again, right after they're resettled here. And you can see these two cards. I actually just found these on Google. I just did a Google search and found that people had posted pictures of their thank you cards. And we've had over 100 refugees go through this program, but these two refugees you can see are from Syria and from Sudan. This is an application from one of the refugees. So we have this application where they apply to become a card writer. This question says, tell us what makes you unique. And this person said, my name is Muke Bao. I'm from Thailand. I speak 4 different languages. I was born in Thailand. I like to play soccer. I am a strong woman. And anyone that's met a refugee knows that this is true. This image is in Syria. 4 years ago. Entire cities completely gutted. Millions of people fleeing for their lives, looking for safety in any way they can. Those that are lucky enough to have any kind of savings will use their entire life savings to pay smugglers to help them flee the country and to flee to safety. Sadly, many of these do not end the way they plan. But they flee to arrive at a place like this. This is the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan. And I had an opportunity to visit this refugee camp. And it was an inspiring experience. As I walked down, there's a main road that cuts down through the center of the city. And they call it the Champs-Élysées, named after the famous shopping street in Paris. And if you walk down the street, there are 1,400 small businesses. Women that have built little restaurants, women that are sewing wedding dresses or baking wedding cakes, men that are building furniture out of scrap pieces of wood. They're finding ways to start their lives over and to create and to add value to their community in some way. And it was a beautiful experience. One of my favorite moments was at the end of the day. I was on this little hill overlooking the city, and all these little kids were following me around. And I obviously don't blend in very well and in the Middle East. And these kids were really curious about what I was doing. And I don't speak any Arabic, and they don't speak English. But we could communicate to each other through our eyes and through our smiles. And instinctively, one of these little boys grabbed my hands and flipped off his sandals and started walking up my legs and my body, and then did a little backflip. I don't know if any of you have done that with your own parents at some point. But pretty soon all these little kids ran up and they all got in line to do the same. And every one of them would take off their shoes before doing this, which I thought was so respectful. My kids don't do that. And but I had these dusty little footprints all the way up my body at the end of the afternoon. And it was beautiful because for a few minutes, these children were able to forget that they were in a refugee camp. The average refugee lives in a camp for 18 years. And so these children have likely been sentenced their entire childhoods to live in this refugee camp. That night, I went back to my hotel, and it was weighing heavy on me, thinking of these little children. And I turned on the TV as I was getting ready for bed just to have something on in the background, and I had the news going on. And all of a sudden, something popped up on the news that caught my attention. And it was something that was broadcast all around the world. And I'm going to play that right now.
Today, the United Nations is asking for 48 hours of relief in the fighting to a break from the violence between the government regime and rebel forces. In 5 years of war, more than 250,000 people have lost their lives. That includes 4,500 children in Aleppo alone. Millions more displaced without a home. Now that includes Omran. And what strikes me is we shed tears, but there are no tears here. He doesn't cry once. That little boy is in total shock. He's stunned inside his home one moment, and the next, lost in the flurry and the fury of war and chaos. At least 3 people were killed by this bomb in this neighborhood. This is Omran. He's alive. We wanted you to know.
So as I watched that image, it just completely broke me inside. And for me, hit home the urgency of the work that we each have to do. Many of you may be wondering whatever happened to that little boy, Edgar, the one that I met in Peru in 2001. And I've wondered the same thing. What ended up happening to that little boy? Was he able to go to school ever? What became of his life as he entered adulthood? Was he able to find a career that was fulfilling to him? And this is something I've thought about for a long time. And a few years ago, after starting Cotopaxi, I decided that I needed to go back to Peru and see if I could find out. And I knew it was an impossible task because I didn't know his last name. I knew nothing about Edgar. I knew he was 9, I knew he shined shoes, that's it. I had a little video of him running next to this bus, waving goodbye to me, 11 seconds long, and I had a picture of him sitting on his shoe shining kit. And so armed with that, I went into the main plaza of Cusco. It's the first time I'd been back since '01, and I started showing people this picture. And through a series of small miracles, I ended up finding him. And this is Edgar. He was so shocked that I'd come back to find him. And he wanted to show me where he lived. And he kept telling me that he'd built his own house and that he wanted me to see this house. And so we took a little bus up into the hills of Cusco, and then we walked up the side of this mountain. And as we did, he told me his life story, that his mother had died giving birth to his little brother when he was 11, and that his dad had died of alcohol abuse when he was 13. And so he's now raising his 2 younger siblings. And when we got to this house, it was a house made of mud with a hole in the ground for the toilet. And there was a part of me that was so discouraged to see how he was living. But there was another part of me that was bursting with pride because I could see how proud he was of what he had, of what he'd worked for. And so we spent the rest of the afternoon talking about what his dreams were, what his ambitions were, if he could do anything. And he talked to me about how he'd always dreamed of being a tour guide because he knew Cusco better than anyone. He'd grown up on the streets. He also knew English. He'd worked with tourists his entire life, and so he picked up English, and he was pretty good at it. And so I helped him find a program, a 3-year program, where he's learning to be a tour guide, and he graduates this year. And the deal is that I help him pay for it as long as he did well in school. So he sends me pictures of his report card, and he does pretty well most of the time, probably like you guys. But I'm just so inspired by him, and I'm so grateful to have Edgar in my life. He's made my life richer. And we're in touch frequently. He's one of the most active Facebook users on the planet. And so I get constant updates, and I'm just really, really proud of him. To wrap up, and then we'll open it to questions, so feel free to start thinking of your questions. But this is one of my favorite quotes by an amazing Utah entrepreneur who's no longer alive, but has left quite a legacy. And he says, "One way to describe a life of service would be to understand that for every right we claim, there is a corresponding duty. For every privilege, a responsibility." He said, "Yet it is more. It is a heart filled with love and gratitude, such that one feels he could never repay the debt he owes. The only way to free ourselves from the prison of selfishness is to pour out our lives in love and service to great causes and noble ideas." I love this quote, and I found that this is true. This is true for me. That as I poured my heart out in service and love of others, I found incredible joy. And I would encourage you each, as you are pursuing your educations and your future careers, to remember that this is what it's all about. This is what success is. Success is not how much money you make. It's how many lives you touch along the way. So I hope that you'll remember that as you go through this next few years. It's an exciting time. You're going to have a lot of great professors and mentors that are going to help you along the way. But if you can remember this, I think you'll find joy and happiness in a way that you can't find otherwise. All right. That's it. Thank you. And thank you. So why don't we open up to some questions? We've got at least one mic going around, so we'll do our best to get you a mic for those that have questions. Yes?
Andres Lopez, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate everything you shared with us. My question is just simple. You mentioned that you left the U.S. at a very young age. Which countries did you live in, and what did your dad do for a living?
Yeah. So my dad is an engineer, a builder, and we moved to the Dominican Republic when I was 4. Lived there for a few years, then we moved to Puerto Rico for 5 years, and then we moved to South America. So I lived in Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil. And so I've spent 17 years there during my childhood and during my adult life. So yeah, and where are you from, Andres?
I'm from Chile.
Chile, yeah. So my family lived in Chile as well for 3 years, but I was in college at the time in the U.S. So when they were there, so they lived in Santiago, in La Reina. So yeah, that's a beautiful country. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, right there.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My name is Dylan Jensen. Thank you so much, like Andres said, for coming. My question is along the lines of the design of your products. Where did you come up with the initial design? And then what did you do to create the first contracts with manufacturers to be able to get those created and to be able to really start your company?
Yeah, really nice question. So I had the idea in Brazil for this business, and I knew the name, I knew our slogan, Gear for Good, I knew about the Questival. Like, I put this whole thing in my mind. I knew how we were going to build this brand. I knew we were going to target this young millennial consumer that really was passionate about our mission. And the next step was for me figuring out, the thing is, I took a sewing class in high school called Outdoor Clothing. Who knew? Like, I had no idea at the time that this would be the path that I would pursue. So I had some basics. I knew I'd sewed a jacket before. I'd sewed some bags and some different things. I sewed some of my own clothes in high school. Like a bunch of friends would always be like, "Dude, make me a pair of those shorts." And but they were pretty rudimentary. I mean, like, not very good actually. But so I knew I needed some better sewers than me, better designers than me. So I went on LinkedIn and found some award-winning designers. And these are people that had worked at great brands like Nike and Columbia and Dakine and Black Diamond. And so I went on LinkedIn, I found them, and Shuri, who you saw in the video, was one of them. And I basically told them about what my vision was for this brand. And they told me that they'd quit their jobs, that they wanted to help us go change the world. They wanted to help eradicate extreme poverty in our lifetimes. And they wanted to go be a part of building this really cool brand that did that. And so I can't say that I had the skills to do it, but I had the ability to go bring people along with me that were experts in that space. And they had relationships with some of our factories, and so that was helpful. And that's how we really got started with the product. So we launched with 5 backpacks. And one funny story, actually. So when we started the first Questival, it's a little different now, but when we did it that first time, we had 3 starting points. One in Logan, one in Salt Lake at the University of Utah, and one down in Provo. And I remember I went down to the Provo launch, and so I went down there, and there was a line that was like 2 blocks long, and I didn't even realize it was for Cotopaxi. I literally had no idea. And then I realized there were people, as I was running by them, they were wearing Cotopaxi shirts and hats. We didn't sell shirts or hats. Like, they'd made their own homemade Cotopaxi gear. Like, there was a Jeep that had our llama like spray painted on its hood, on its doors, and on the back, and I was like, I wouldn't even do that to my own car. Like, who is doing this? And but it really, the brand resonated with those consumers. But we started with those 5 bags, and then we've slowly built out the product line since then. So yeah, great question. Thanks.
What happened to the original 2 llamas that you brought around campuses?
Oh, this is a sad story. So, Koto and Paxi, these dear llama friends of ours. Paxi has returned to our maker. He was, surprisingly, llamas only live for like 7 years or so, and this is like almost 6 years ago. So, and Paxi was always I think he was like the runt of the litter. He was tiny. He was like a miniature llama, the cutest little llama. But so he passed away. And then we took Koto, because llamas don't like to be by themselves. They're herd animals. So we took him and we brought him to a llama sanctuary down at the Hare Krishna temple down in Spanish Fork, if anyone's been down there. If you haven't, you should go check out the llamas. They're pretty wild. So, and Koto's still there. and he's still kicking and spitting. So, yeah. Great question. Yes?
So you said that you've started a few different businesses. What would you say is the hardest part of starting a business?
The hardest part of any business really is the people. Getting the right people to join your team, making sure you have the right culture, keeping people happy, helping people grow as they develop and learn, especially as a business like ours that's scaling very quickly. Sometimes the people that join in the earliest days, maybe they're not in the right role anymore as the business scales. So those are always tricky things to deal with. I'd say building a business in Brazil was the hardest thing I ever did, though. I recently, there's a brand called Cotton On. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. It's like this Australian brand. They have stores around Utah and around the world. I think they're like $2.5 billion, like a big, big company. Apparently some of their senior execs are like obsessed with Cotopaxi, which I had no idea, but one of them showed up in Salt Lake a few weeks ago. And we went and grabbed breakfast, and he was just, we were just chatting, and I mentioned how my last business was in Brazil, and he's like, I don't even know you, but I know you need a hug. And I was like, yes, I do need a hug. And apparently he went and, with Cotton On, he was in charge of expansion into Brazil and South Africa. So for 6 years, he was opening up stores in these markets. So in South Africa, he opened 250 stores. And in Brazil, he opened 6. Brazil is a very difficult place to do business. And so I learned a ton, had some really fun successes, had some really tough failures. It was a really wonderful learning experience. And so yeah. All right, next question. Okay. And by the way, we need some ladies to ask some questions, right? So if you're a lady, think of some questions, raise your hands. Hi. Yes.
I was just wondering, what was the foundational bricks or whatever that you brought to those original 5 people that you had on your team? Like, what was your pitch towards them? Like, this is what we have, this is our plan, this is how we're going forward with this.
Yeah. Great question. So I mentioned this at dinner to those that were at the table with us, but I had the vision. I knew what I wanted to go build, and I just needed to convince people to go join me to do this. And so I brought these 5 people on board, some designers, a brand guy, an ops guy, and a finance guy. And this team, we basically got together in a cabin here in Utah. And I flew in from Brazil, they flew into Utah. Some of them had never been to Utah before. And I laid out the vision for what this brand stood for and what we represented. And we didn't talk about the product we were going to make. We didn't talk about our go-to-market strategy. I didn't even really talk about the Questival. What I talked about were what our core values were, what this brand stood for, and how we were going to go build something that was different than anything that existed. And my job in that meeting was not to lay the strategy for how we were going to go conquer the world. It was about how was I going to inspire these people to understand what was in my head, and how we were going to build something completely different from anything they'd ever worked for before, been a part of. And that is, at the end of those few days together in that cabin, that's what we accomplished. Those people, they left inspired. And they left saying, I'm done with my job, I'm going to quit, and I'll work for free. I just want to help you go build this thing. And so that was really what it was about. It was about inspiring them with something big. At the end of the day, people want to build. One of my favorite quotes is by a man named Dieter Uchtdorf. He says, the desire to create is one of the deepest yearnings of the human soul. And this is true. Every one of us has a desire to create. And for some, it might be music. For some, it might be art. It might be creating a business. It might be cooking. But we all want to create something. And so when you give people an opportunity to go create with you, people most of the time are going to jump at it. So that was what I did with those early employees. All right. Yes?
Okay, awesome. First, I want to say I'm like totally the millennial adventurer that you're targeting, and
yes.
I love Cotopaxi, and even more so after today, so thank you for everything that you're doing. And then also, I don't know if I understood this right, did you say that 100% of your profits go towards like charitable things?
Good question. I'm glad you're clarifying. So we've been around for 5.5 years, and to date, we've donated all of our profits and a lot more. But long term, that's not the plan, right? We're going to be able to continue giving in a meaningful way. So like last year, we had about $1 million that we committed towards social impact. And, but over time, we're going to start getting to the point where our profits are not as tight as they are now. So right now, we're giving away all the profits. We give away around 3 to 4% of our total revenues. 1% of that is done through grants. It means we're literally writing checks to the IRC to support refugees or to Girl Up to support girl education or Educate Girls, these different organizations. And then we also donate other percentages towards the refugee card writing program, towards our supply chain work that we do. So there's a bunch of other efforts that we have outside of just writing checks. But so right now that happens to be all of our profits, but over the next 5 years, there'll be leftover profits, which is what I promised investors would happen, right? So at some point there needs to be something sustainable, right? We can't just do that always. At the same time, our business, if we did $1 million last year, like 5 years from now, that amount is going to just be even bigger and bigger. And so that's what I'm really excited about. So yeah, really good question. I'm glad you asked it. Yeah. All right. We're going to pass the mic down.
Oh, here.
Okay.
So when things don't go as planned, so let's say you have like a huge setback, like a failure per se.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it, and what steps you take to get back on your feet?
Okay, great. Yeah, and let's pass the mic down this way. We'll get the mic over on this side of the room, right? That's a really great question because a lot of times it's a lot more fun to talk about our successes, right? It's not very fun to talk about our failures. I've had failures as well. My first business and my second business I built with my cousin, someone that I would see, I wasn't growing up here, but we'd see each other every summer. He'd go down and visit my family in Latin America, and we were very close. And during our last business together, we had a falling apart, where our relationship ended up getting strained, and it was and is like a really painful thing for me. And I would consider it like my greatest failure in business was that this relationship was damaged. And we're fortunately mending that relationship, but we were co-CEOs in a business that was growing really rapidly, and we just had different visions for how we wanted to take it. And we had very different personalities, and we wanted to build different cultures within the organization. And that just created some strain. And so at the same time, I learned a lot of great things, and I was able to be a better partner the next time around. My Stefan, who's my COO at Cotopaxi, was a business school classmate of mine. He's from Germany, from Munich, and he was in the German Special Forces, worked for McKinsey, the consulting firm, and then after graduating from school, he became the CEO himself of a venture-backed business that he started. And when I started Cotopaxi, he asked me if he'd come join and be my partner. And he didn't care if he wasn't CEO. He said, I'll take whatever role you think is best for me. I just want to go build this thing that can make a difference. And he's been an amazing partner. And so the 6 years we've been working together, we've never once had an argument. And so it's through painful experiences that oftentimes we grow and we develop and we learn how to be better. And so that's a painful failure for me. All right, yes.
If I could, I just wanted to ask
How much time do we have left? 5 minutes, okay, perfect.
I'll make it quick.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of roll back to your time at Wharton when you had those 60 companies list. What is it that made you choose to start a business? And you also walked away from a handful of really neat opportunities from some successful businesses. It was pretty hard to walk away from it. Why did you? And after Cotopaxi, do you see yourself starting something else, or is Cotopaxi kind of with it until the end?
Yeah, great idea. Great question. So, this idea of taking 60 ideas and then kind of whittling them down came from a professor of mine in business school. And there's a book called Innovation Tournaments that was written by 2 professors at Wharton. And it's a short book, but it really kind of runs through the process of why this matters. And so it was really valuable for us to run through that process. We actually took a class at Wharton where everyone in the class had to come up with 10 business ideas. We all submitted them online into a system called the Darwinator, and it would spit the ideas back to you, and everyone had to rate other people's ideas. So you'd rate them from 1 to 10. You didn't know whose ideas they were. Then they'd come back to you. And we ended up taking, this class had about 40 or 50 students. We ended up taking about 500 ideas, and by the end of the quarter, narrowing those down to about 3. And every semester, every quarter this class happens, there's like a business that comes out of that class. It's really remarkable. And so I took that same practice and with my cousin and said, hey, why don't we run a process that's really disciplined around it? I think the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make is that they get so anxious to start something on their own that they aren't disciplined enough about ideation. So spend 6 months or a year ideating. Come up with as many ideas as possible. If you come up with 100 ideas, one of those ideas is going to be really good. If you only come up with 5 ideas or 7 ideas, I can pretty much guarantee that none of those ideas is going to do anything. It takes a bigger quantity of ideas to be able to identify great ideas. And so that was a really fun process to go through. All right. Last question?
Yeah, this will be our last question. I think it died. Oh, hello.
Oh, let's go. Okay, well, we got to, let's do 2 more. I'll be quick in my answers. All right.
Which of your personality traits has best helped you to become successful?
Okay, I'll say maybe 2 things. And I'll say, first of all, I'm not the smartest person. Like when I was at Wharton, I felt really intimidated. I think 40% of my classmates had gone to Ivy League undergrads as well. And so just really, really bright people. But what I found was that it was basically this really deep desire to go build and create, and just being kind of relentless in doing that was one thing. And then the second thing is just like having a sincere interest in people. I recently did this really cool program called the Presidential Leadership Scholars with President Clinton and President Bush. And as we studied each president, and we went to, every month we'd go to a presidential library. I got to meet George H.W. Bush and Barbara Bush before they both passed. And what I learned, and the commonality between all these presidents that we studied, was that every one of them had a deep interest in other people. And I think that's something that, that really sets you apart if you can figure that out and find that in yourself. So yeah, great question. And then last one up here.
Okay, so my question is, how did you find and get access to all of the nonprofits that you work with? And how can we as college students start making a difference?
Oh, all right, 2 in 1. Very clever, I like it. So I told this story at dinner too, but like we first started with nonprofits that I knew and was passionate about, an orphanage in Bolivia that I loved and that I'd been to a number of times, a little school in Cusco that supported street children. Edgar had actually lived in this little place for a while as an orphan. So I was finding these places that I was really passionate about. And then a year into the business, we hired a chief impact officer, an expert in nonprofits. And she came in and basically told me I was doing everything wrong, and she was right. I didn't know what I was doing. My heart was in the right place, but we weren't measuring any impact. We had no idea where our dollars were going. And so she helped us structure something much more disciplined. And we set up this foundation at of impact that was really focused on 3 core issues, which was healthcare, education, and livelihood training. These are 3 pillars that we believe are inextricably linked to poverty alleviation. And so we started rethinking our social impact strategy. And then the second question was around how does college students start giving back or doing good and stuff? This is the time to start, because I remember in college I found that internship in Peru. I also became a Big Brother, if anyone's involved in Big Brothers, Big Sisters. When I was in grad school, twice a week I'd go spend time with inner city kids and spend hours with them. I oftentimes I remember Thursdays I was like never ready for school because I'd been spending time on Wednesday evenings with these kids. And it was like, but for me it was like I was committing part of my life to giving back. And it's been honestly the most rewarding thing of anything I've done is the ability to go and touch lives. And I think that's something that starts at your age. This is where many of you have already had experiences where you've been able to go spend time doing that. And I think the more you can find ways to continue doing that while you're in school, even with all the demands that you have, I think it'll set really some some habits that will allow you to kind of build this into your life as you get older. So, all right, well, thank you very much. It's been awesome to be here. Thank you.